Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to start service. If you want to turn your cell phones on the silent mute, please.
In the words of Ecclesiastes, for everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot the planted. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time for lamenting and a time for dancing. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time of love and a time of hate. A time of war and a time of peace. We come together this afternoon to celebrate the life of Dan McAlary. Dan was born in Derry, Ireland on June 29, 1947, and passed away suddenly but peacefully in his home on April 26, 2021, at the too young age of 73. He was so loved, and he will be deeply missed. The graveside funeral service was held in North Carolina on Friday, April 30th. In addition to the traditional Jewish burial rites, Dan was given the honor of a military tribute, complete with a flag ceremony and the playing of taps. We are grateful that several friends and family members were able to attend to offer their love and comfort to the family. And we are so thankful for all of you and your presence here today as we remember Dan. Dan was the beloved husband of Sue, the devoted father of Jonathan and Jen and Chris, and the adoring pop-pop of Leah and Ryan. He was the son of the late Daniel and Rosella, and the brother of Yvonne and Fred, Jackie and Albert, Brian and Donna, and Kathy and Randy, and all their families. Dan was very close with Sue's family, including his in-laws, the late Irving and Rochelle. He was like a brother to Annette and Roger, and Dorothy and Sam, and their families. In 2007, Sue, Dan, and Jonathan met their Israeli cousins, Jackie and Avraham, and their families, and have kept in close touch over the years. In loving memory of Dan, Jackie is saying a mourner's prayer, the Kaddish, for a year in Israel. We are most grateful for this mitzvah. We also wish to recognize with love the Sherlock family, who were best friends for over 50 years. I stand before you this afternoon, not only as a rabbi, but as a friend. My family and the McAlarys have known each other for over 17 years, sharing the entirety of life's experiences together. I feel so honored to be able to offer you a glimpse of the Dan we all knew and loved, from his family's remembrances as well as from a few of my own. Dan and his family immigrated to the United States when he was 7 years old. He grew up in Philadelphia and served in the Army during the Vietnam War. He was stationed in Korea. Following in his father's footsteps, Dan became a carpenter, a master carpenter, and was a committed union member belonging to the Philadelphia Carpenters Union. He was an honorary member of the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners of America for over 50 years. When Dan was 18, he met a lovely young woman at a gas station. It was Sue, who was only 16 at the time. They liked each other, but then Dan went off to serve his country, and Sue went off to college. They did not keep in touch. But once Dan was discharged, he looked Sue up, and they fell in love. 3 months later, in May 1972, they eloped. Sue tells the story of how, on their way to the Justice of the Peace, Dan picked up a hitchhiker, a long-haired hippie with a guitar. Even on their way to be married, Dan was always looking for a way to help someone. Sue had reminded Dan to make reservations for after the wedding, so Dan made dinner reservations, thinking that that was what Sue wanted. Eventually, he realized he needed to make hotel reservations. That was the beginning of 49 incredible years of sharing and loving and living and being each other's best friend. The relationship was very special. They were always there for each other and would do anything for each other. 2 days after Dan passed away, they would have celebrated their 49th anniversary. Dan had converted to Judaism, and they loved spending the Jewish holidays with Sue's parents and family. The Irish side of Dan was also a big part of his heritage as well, and so the Christian holidays were celebrated with Dan's side of the family. We will miss Dan. He has been described as passionate, compassionate, nurturing, and even a bit stubborn, or should I say determined. Dan was always there, giving love unconditionally, to help Jonathan with any medical issues, to be by Sue's side every moment, especially when she needed help. He was always there. For example, when they still lived in Cherry Hill and Jen and Chris had moved to Maryland, Dan would drive down every Thursday in order to babysit for his granddaughter. That was Dan. Down in North Carolina, whether it was attending Leah's All-Star Cheer or Ryan's baseball and flag football games, Dan was their greatest fan. Just a few days ago, at one of Ryan's football games, Ryan turned to his mom and said, "You know, Pop-Pop was here watching me." And we know that Dan will always be there, watching over his family. Aside from Sue, his children, and his grandchildren, Dan's greatest loves were his boat and fishing. He taught Jen and Jonathan how to fish. Jen remembers the first time he took her fishing. They went to a little pond that was right next to a dog kennel, so they named it Puppy Pond. Jen caught her first fish there that day, and they were both so proud. And recently, she watched Leah and Ryan catch their first fish with their pop-pop, and that childhood memory came rushing back to her. About a week ago, right before the funeral, the family went out for dinner, and Ryan said, "I miss Pop-Pop. Who is going to teach us how to fish?" Jonathan answered, "Pop-Pop taught me how to fish when I was little, and now I will be there for you, and I will teach you and Leah how to fish." Jonathan notes how much he has learned from his father and is committed to passing down his dad's traditions to Ryan and Leah. The McAlarys always had boats, and they would fit as many people in as they could to take them on boat rides. But Dan discovered another love once they moved to the south. He bought a black Mercedes convertible. How he loved taking Leah and Ryan for rides with the top down, with fishing poles hanging out of the car. He spent hours and hours washing and polishing the car and got so much joy out of having a sports car. Dan also found another new hobby once they arrived in the South. He became a self-proclaimed farmer. He planted a garden and filled it with all the favorite foods his grandchildren loved. Strawberries, blueberries, cucumbers, whatever they liked, Dan would plant it for them. After Dan passed away, Ryan and Leah were drawing pictures to represent their papa. Leah drew a boat, and Ryan drew strawberries. They will carry precious memories of their grandfather with them throughout their lives, and will always love boats, fishing, and strawberries. Dan showed his love in concrete, tangible, practical ways. When Jonathan and Jen were young, he put in a pool, a sandbox, and swings. For Ryan and Leah, he built an amazing treehouse and outdoor playhouse. And he loved helping Chris work on projects in Jen and Chris's home. In return, Chris would always help Dan fix things on the boat. For Sue, he was always creating new ways of improving their house by putting in a new bathroom or a new floor or whatever other improvements he could think of. When Jonathan was a young adult, Dan wanted him to learn about his profession, so he would take him to various work sites with him and teach him the tricks of the trade, so to speak. Jonathan loved working with his dad, and especially being with him for that special time. Now, when Jen was a teenager, she wanted her dad to teach her how to drive. So Dan made her sit in the driveway and learn how to change a tire before he let her drive the car for the first time. Dan explained that no daughter of his was going to have to rely on someone else to change a tire. Jen reports that so far she's never had to change a tire herself, but she is grateful that her dad raised her to be independent strong. Dan's happiest times were when he and Sue were together with the entire family. This love for family was the impetus to move to North Carolina, to be near Jen and Chris, and to be able to be with their grandchildren. And this dream was fulfilled, with Sue's babysitting and helping Jen, and Dan's dropping in at Jen's just to hang out with Leah and Ryan, and time for Jonathan, Jen, Chris, and the kids to spend on the boat. The past 2 years were filled with great closeness and joy. Dan just adored his grandchildren and would tell Jen so often, "Do you know how incredible these kids are?" He looked for opportunities to be with them and teach them new things. For example, when Ryan was learning to hit a ball, Dan put a baseball on a string at the end of a fishing rod and taught Ryan how to swing at it without Dan having to run and chase the ball. Jen says that her father has taught her how to be a grandparent and how to give unconditional love. One of the most memorable moments in Dan's life was an extraordinary trip to Israel that Dan, Sue, and Jonathan took with my own family in 2007. We all had a fabulous time, and Dan savored every moment. There is a wonderful picture of Dan and Jonathan together at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem that Jonathan will always treasure. As Dan traveled the country, he collected stones from every site. Sue wondered why the suitcases were so heavy. They were filled with Dan's memories of the history and the beauty and the love for the Holy Land and its people. Of course, the trip was also filled with laughter and camel rides and camaraderie. We will always remember those days with big smiles. A symbol of Dan's presence is to be found in the flight of a cardinal. The night after Dan's passing, a cardinal flew by Jen and Chris as they were sitting on their back deck. It landed in the tree next to them, and it sat there for the longest time, chirping away. They discussed how the cardinal is supposed to be a symbol that a loved one is near. The next morning, it was back to greet Sue and Jonathan, and it came back later that afternoon to see Ryan as well. Leah was not home for any of these sightings and was upset that she had missed it. She went outside to do some tumbling on the trampoline, and the cardinal flew right over to the trampoline and landed there. It stayed there until Leah saw the bird, and then it flew away. The next day, a cardinal flew across Jen's windshield as she was driving along, talking to Dan's best friend, Paul. Over the last several days, the cardinal has been a daily presence. It is as if Dan is sending a message. I am here, and I will continue to be here with you. Dan's physical body may have departed this earth, but his soul and his spirit will remain with us forever. Dan was a very special person who left behind footprints of a life well lived. He gave love and he received love. He has left a huge legacy, modeling what family devotion and commitment are all about, and reminding us that we must live each day fully with love and joy. In each part of his life, Dan touched and changed us. He made a difference in this world, and we were blessed to have had him part of our lives. Dan chose his path in life and was able to live the way he wanted to, doing what he loved and being with the people he loved. In the Ethics of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot, we read, "Who is honored? One who honors, loves, and cares for other people." Dan McAlary was such a person, and he is truly honored by all of us who knew him and loved him. May Dan's memory always be a blessing. Amen. At this time, those of you who have these small booklets, please open your booklets to page 3 as we recite the 23rd Psalm together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This is the time we gather to remember Dan. This is the time we recall the bonds that hold us, the love we shared, the memories that sustain us. I'd like to ask Jen and Jonathan and Chris to come forward to share some thoughts at this time.
On behalf of the McAlary and Canosa families, I want to thank you all for your love and support over the last 2 weeks and for taking the time to be here with us today. It means the world to us to be surrounded by so much love in a time of such grief, and we thank you all from the bottom of our hearts. My dad's passing was sudden. There was no time to prepare and no goodbyes to be said. My mother lost her husband. Jonathan and I lost our father. Chris lost his father-in-law. Many of you lost a sibling, a cousin, a friend. My kids lost their papa. And I struggle to provide answers to questions like, how long will it take until our hearts stop hurting? Well, I don't have all the answers, and I can't say that our hearts will ever truly stop hurting. I have come to understand that grief is really just love. With undying love comes unending grief. That is the price that we all pay for love. So while we may always carry a subtle ache in our hearts, I hope that it will serve as a constant reminder of the love that we have for my dad. And that love is what will keep his memory alive. You know, it's sort of ironic how much time I spent thinking about what I wanted to say to honor my dad's memory today, since I know he would absolutely hate us making such a big deal over him. And he'd probably be telling us all to blow off this late service and go meet him at Kaminsky's for a bar, at the bar. And while we most certainly will raise a glass in your honor, Pop, we'd like to take a few minutes to honor your life and your legacy as well. My dad was a very simple man who required little to be happy. Family, a few good friends, fishing, being out on the water, tending to his little vegetable garden, tinkering with his boat, a cold Miller Lite in a frosted mug, and endless hours of Fox News. His greatest loves were his beloved wife Susan of 49 years, his children, my brother Jonathan and I, his grandchildren Leah and Ryan, and my husband Chris, whom he truly loved like another son. My dad kept his circle small, but he loved us big. He brought my mom her coffee every morning, lovingly prepared home-cooked meals for her, some of which were inedible, and held her hand as they fell asleep each night. He even planted the most amazing rose bushes outside her window just to see her smile. While life wasn't always easy for them, and while we know what a pain in the butt my dad could be at times, my parents loved each other deeply and shared a lifetime of memories together. Growing up, I remember my dad working a lot. He did whatever it took to provide for his family. Whether that was working overtime or taking on side jobs, he never let us go without. He often left very early in the morning before the sun would come up, and I would set my alarm just so I could open my blinds and wave goodbye as he left for work. As an adult, I realized the sacrifice it took to give us a beautiful home, send us to the best schools, pay for my college education, and give us the wedding of our dreams. While I imagine it wasn't easy to juggle work and a young family, our dad still managed to find time to connect with us. He was a den leader for Jonathan's Boy Scout troop and loved their camping trips and Pinewood Derby races. He taught Jonathan to fish, how to play the guitar, and was always there to cheer him on in Special Olympics. He sat by Jonathan's bedside during his many hospital stays and would hold him through his seizures to make sure that he was safe. As a young girl, I remember snuggling on my dad's lap and getting rocket ship rides up the stairs when it was time for bed. He He would put me on his back and count down before takeoff, and I would laugh the whole way to my bedroom. Before I went to sleep each night, my dad and I would have the exact same exchange. He'd say, "I love you, Munchkin." I'd say, "I love you too, Daddy." He said, "Well, I love you more." I said, "Well, I love you the most." He said, "Well, I love you first." And I'd pause and then happily scream, "Well, I love you the best," and I win. It seemed to get longer and longer over the years, mostly because we were both so stubborn and didn't want to lose. As an adult, I enjoyed our many boat rides, our talks about the world and politics, and watching him with my kids. He would stop by almost daily just to say hello and give me a hug in the middle of my workday. I'm so thankful to have had him so close these last few years. When it came to my husband, Chris, nothing gave my dad more pleasure than trying to get a rise out of him. Like when he thought it would be so funny to say no when Chris asked for his blessing to propose to me. That really happened. Or when he would so graciously lean over Chris's shoulder to offer direction on how to appropriately carve our Thanksgiving turkey. While Chris and my dad had a very playful and sarcastic relationship, it was clear that it was built on a mutual love and respect for each other. My dad would always say, "You know, maybe we should keep him around a little longer." And that was all the approval I ever needed. Lastly, my dad was the most amazing pop-pop, and he absolutely adored my children. He was so proud of them and would tell me every chance he got how incredible his grandchildren were. He taught them to fish, he loved to watch them flip on the trampoline, always showed up for cheer competitions and baseball games, loved to ride them around in his convertible and take them for boat rides, and would always stop by with their favorite treats. When I would gently ask him to maybe lay off the junk food, he would say, "I'm the pop-pop and I make the rules." I had to pick and choose my battles. My dad converted to Judaism many years ago, but his Irish roots were the foundation of his upbringing. He was so proud of his Irish heritage and being a leprechaun, as my kids would joke. So in honor of our favorite leprechaun, I'd like to close with an Irish blessing that hung on the wall of my grandmother's house. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. The rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Daddy Mac, you may have loved me first, but I love you the best, forever and always until the end of time. May you rest in peace for all of eternity, and may your memory forever be a blessing to us all. And so we have a very special tribute to my dad. My cousin, David, is a violinist, and he recorded himself playing Danny's voice because he couldn't be here today, which is a very special song to our family.
Thank you for those beautiful words, and thank you for playing that beautiful violin, Danny boy. Do not look at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am the sunlight of ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn's rain. When you awake in the morning's hush, I am the swift, uplifting rush of cardinals in circled flight. I am the soft star that shines at night. Do not look at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die. I'd like to ask Brian McAlary, Dan's brother, to come forward to share some song thoughts.
Seems there's some common thoughts about my brother. Where do you begin to summarize a man's life? I'll start with our parents. They were from County Derry, Northern Ireland. Mom was raised in a small town called McAlary, and Dad from a farm just outside of town. Dad was the youngest of 13 children, his mother's seventh son. It was his mother who thought she had enough field hands about the place, and that it would be handy to have a carpenter, and she encouraged him to take up his tools. This decision would affect several generations of Dad's family to follow in his footsteps. After World War II, Mom and Dad were married in London in 1946, where my father had gone to find work as there was good money to be made for a carpenter there. It didn't take long for them to make a baby, so we might say that Dad was made in England. Our parents returned to Ireland before he was born in 1947, and unlike his two younger siblings, he was actually born in a hospital in the town of Macclesfield. Shortly thereafter, the family moved to Derry, and Dad opened a bar. Frustrated by discrimination being part of the Catholic minority, they elected to move to the United States in 1953 and joined my father's two brothers and two sisters. Dan was 6 at the time. His lilting Irish brogue made him quite a celebrity when he went to school, but it was soon lost. And through the 1950s and 60s, Danny was part of a growing family and a larger extended Irish community. After high school, Danny followed in his father's footsteps and took up the family trade at 17. That's when he bought his first car, a green Chevy Malibu convertible, super sport. I'm seeing a trend. The beginning of a lifelong appreciation of cars. But misfortune cast a shadow, and Danny was in an accident and fell 3 stories on a job site. If it happened today, he'd probably be a millionaire, but in the 60s, that just was not the case. Instead, his leg was pinged, and he was sent home in a full body cast to lie in a hospital bed in our living room for almost a year. Despite obvious limitations, he managed to get around the house, and at least once my father was only too happy to put Dan in the back seat of the convertible and give him a ride. Seems Dad had a fondness for fast cars too. It's around the same time that he met a young woman named Susan, and they would get together in just a few short years. As the war in Vietnam escalated, the draft rolls were growing, and Danny saw the handwriting on the wall. He chose to enlist, believing the recruiter that enlistees would have better options. Off to boot camp in North Carolina, he eventually ended up in line for deployment to Vietnam when he and a few others were plucked from the line and sent to El Paso, Texas for training on missile programs. I can just imagine a young man in 1967, technically a teenager, being on his own in the border town just from Mexico, where life was cheap and easy. I wonder what he learned while he was there. Upon completion of his training, Danny was deployed to Korea, and his family back home took a sigh of relief that he had managed to avoid Vietnam. So now Danny was left to enjoy life as a young 20-something and enjoy what the nearby towns had to offer a career. I remember my mother reading a letter from her son in which he asked, could he send her some ladies' nylons and hair dye for a wife of a friend? Bejesus, she said. He must think I'm pretty stupid. Back in the States in 1970, time for my eldest sister's wedding, Danny was caught up in the excitement of the 70s. First, there was the Porsche 911, sadly left at the bottom of the ravine in the Poconos. Quickly followed by an MG Midget, both convertibles. And it was around that time that Danny and Sue renewed their courtship, and they would shortly grow into proposing marriage. This was to become a bigger problem than anyone expected. When Yvonne married a gasp Protestant, a man born in Austria, certainly not an Irishman, that was stretching the boundaries almost to the breaking point. But Susan was Jewish, and that was more than both families could endure, and they joined forces to put an end to this madness. But the young lovers were not to be deterred, and they were married in 1972 without their family's blessing or attendance. Shunned as outcasts, they clung to each other and determined to do what they knew was right for them. In time, both their families grew to accept the marriage, though I suspect both thought it would never work. The religious and cultural differences were too great and would eventually tear them apart. Well, we all know how that turned out. They would have celebrated 49 wonderful years of marriage days after Danny passed. Through good times and in bad, for better or for worse, for richer or poor, they held on. Married life was a stabling influence for Danny. Some would remember him as being a bit on the wild side. But marriage tamed his heart, buying his first home, family car, Danny working his trade, Susan teaching, they built a family. First Jonathan, then Jennifer, who married Chris, and they have had 2 children, Leah and Ryan. Family life was good for Danny, and you could say it settled him down a bit. He loved his kids, was enraptured by his grandchildren, who became the joy of his life. Fast cars eventually gave way to boats, and fishing and the love of life on the water. Happy days. Eventually, they would retire, and the whole family moved to North Carolina so they could be together as a family, and Danny could continue to see those beautiful grandchildren on a daily basis. That's where the story comes to an end in an untimely passing. A good life cut far too short, which brings us together today in memorandum. I can imagine him joining with his parents, aunts, uncles, friends, and cousins, building a place where we will all join together, a house on the hill overlooking the valley below. No Irishman named Danny can escape being connected with Danny Boy, and I'd like to share with you the lyrics today, written by an English lawyer. He altered the lyrics to fit a traditional Irish melody captured in the town of Limavady, not far from where my parents were from. Just for the record, there is no such place as Londonderry, so please don't call it the Londonderry era. For those of you who remember The Sopranos, Christopher Moltisanti is gunned down, and he lapses into a coma where his vision of hell is being trapped in an Irish bar where they sing Danny Boy over and over. But the lyrics are beautiful. I want you to use your imagination and envision our Danny playing his part after he has been called away far too soon. So we've been lucky enough to hear a beautiful tune. Now I'd like to read to you some of the words, and I'll try not to cry. Oh, Danny Boy, the pipes are calling, from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the flowers dying. 'Tis you must go, and I must bide. But come ye back when summer's in the meadow, or when the valley's hushed and white with snow. I'll be here in sunshine and in shadow. Oh, Danny Boy, you know I love you so. And when you come and all the flowers are dying, if I am dead, as dead I well may be, You'll come and find the place where I am lying, and kneel and say the Ave there for me. And I shall hear though soft you tread above me, and all my grave will warmer and sweeter be. And if you bend and tell me that you love me, I shall sleep in peace until you come to me. God bless you, Danny. No more crying. If you were here, you'd be like, got you out of Florida, didn't I? Long pants, long sleeve shirt, tie, jacket.
Thank you for those wonderful memories. In Proverbs we read, "The human spirit is the light of God. Within each of us, God implants a divine spark. Each of us has the obligation to tend the spark and fan it into a flame that will light up one's own life and the life of others. A lit candle can be snuffed out, or it can burn out, or it can kindle other candles. When the flame is passed on to others, the flame will continue to burn long after the original candle has been extinguished. In this way, the flame will last forever." This time I'd like to ask Sam Fagenbaum, Dan's brother-in-law, to come forward for some memories.
I apologize in advance if some of what I'm going to read you've heard twice now. I want to thank all of you for being here today to share in this memorial for Dan. As complicated as Dan was, is as simple as he was. For those who loved him, it was his total and complete soul. For those who didn't love him, well, I guess it was with his total and complete soul as well. The people that came first in his life were his wife Susan, just 2 days shy of 49 years of marriage, his children Jonathan, Jen, and Chris, and of course his grandchildren, Leah and Ryan, who trumped everyone. For them, his love was completely unconditional. And as far as he was concerned, there was never anything they could do that was wrong. He loved being with them, watching them, teaching them, and even playing with them. They truly were the light of his life. Whenever he talked about them, his love and pride just oozed out of him. And all you saw was this huge smile that covered his entire face. It was really a beautiful thing to see. This hard, tough guy, all prickly on the outside, was total softness, sweetness, and mush on the inside when it came to his family. There was nothing he wouldn't do for them. But Dan's kindness didn't just focus on his wife, children, and grandchildren. You couldn't ask for a better son-in-law when it came to helping to care for Rochelle in her later years. Susan was still working, so Dan would pick up Rochelle and bring her to his home, cook dinner for her and Susan, and afterwards take her home. He and Susan even took her on a cruise with them. Now that took a lot of guts. And if you knew Rochelle, a lot of patience. But that was Dan. So what made Dan happy? What else made Dan happy? That's an easy one to answer. Being on this boat. He was the captain and Sue his first mate. He could be out on the water all day and nothing bothered him. A beer in one hand and the wheel of the boat in the other, and life was good. Now, speaking about good, back in the earlier days, Dan really enjoyed smoking pot.
What changed? What are you doing?
All you had to do to get high was walk into Sue and Dan's home and just breathe. On one particular day that comes to mind, while Dorothy and I were visiting Sue and Dan tells me he has to go to the supply house, AKA the dealer, to pick up some material and ask me if I wanted to go with him. Why not? When we got to the supply house in North Philly, I'm told to wait in the living room while Dan and the supply manager, AKA the dealer, go into another room. I just figured Dan was going to come back with maybe a nickel bag or two. But he walks out of the room with a huge black trash bag filled to the top with weed. I don't know how often Dan got to get more supplies, but it looked to me like he and the supply manager were best of buds. Dan was also a master carpenter. I was amazed at how much he knew about construction, and even more impressed with his skills. From framing and trim to flooring, cabinetry, and painting, there was virtually nothing he couldn't do. And if he didn't do it right the first time, which to anyone else would have been perfect, he would tear it up all apart and start all over again until it was just right, for Dan's definition of right. Dan was always there to lend a helping hand. I remember when Dorothy and I first got married and living in our townhouse, we were looking to replace our foyer floor, and Dan was right there with me, or should I say, I was there with him, installing tile, and again, it could only be done the way Dan did things, the right way. Sound familiar, Chris? When we moved to Cherry Hill, it was Dan who remodeled the old kitchen of our new home, installing new cabinets, tops, etc. And when he was done, it was absolutely beautiful. We shared holiday dinners, Father's Day brunch, even Super Bowls together, and he was always the first in line to get his shot of vodka. And shot, and shot, and shot. Even I couldn't compete with him, except for one Super Bowl when I was mixing the drinks. After I don't know how many shots and mixed drinks we had, I walked into the family room only to find he and Susan both passed out on the floor. You could have a conversation with Dan on just about any topic, but what really raised his temperature, politics. Either don't take part in conversation with him on that subject, especially if you were at odds with his thinking, or just agree to disagree. He was rock solid in what he believed, and there was no way you were going to change his mind. A part of me wants to believe that he loved to give you a dig, just to see if he can get a rise out of you. That was my brother-in-law, Dan. And if I had to choose, I couldn't have chosen better. These last few years were difficult on him, Susan, and the rest of the family. How fortunate it was to have both Jen and Chris close by. They were so helpful on so many levels, and I know they will be there for Susan and Jonathan going forward. Dorothy and I said Dan had 9 lives, and I guess God just decided that 9 was enough. Dan lived his life the way he wanted to live it. He knew the consequences of not following protocol, but Dan always knew who he was, and he was always true to himself. Dan, no more suffering for you. May you rest in peace, and I will miss you deeply.
The psalmist has said, "Our deeds are as steps upon a sandy shore. The wind blows and the footsteps fade. But compassion and righteousness remain. Wonder and blessing live on, from children to children, generation to generation, age to age. The teaching is carried by word and deed, so that even when the voice is silent, the song remains." I'd like to ask Jerry McAlary, Dane's cousin, to share some memories at this time.
I'm not used to doing this. This is the first time I've done it, so I'm a little nervous. We are gathered here today to remember Daniel A. McAlary, a devoted and loving husband to Susan, father to Jonathan and Jennifer, and her husband Christopher, grandfather to Ryan, Leah, sibling to Yvonne, Jackie, Brian, Kathy, and his nieces and nephews. I had the pleasure to become friends with Danny when we were kids. From Sunday dinners in Collingdale to my parents' house, where we used to sneak cigarettes to each other. Thinking back, many memories have faded away with age, or rather old age. But there are some important memories that will never leave me. When he stood godfather to my son Joey, his service to our country in the U.S. Army, from when he met Susan, the birth of his children, and the strong dedication to his family. More often remember to most recent memories when Ella and first moved to New Jersey. Dan and Sue were there to invite us in Kaminsky's along with Franny and Joni on Fridays, which became a regular rendezvous for drinks and food. My journey on Fridays, which became a regular rendezvous. Danny wasn't known for passing up a free meal. He strongly embraced our family traditions of stubbornness and often had no problem letting you know that he was thinking, which often raised eyebrows. It was his honesty and frankness and joy. He also embraced another family tradition of being a good friend and always being there when you needed him. Danny has always been and will always remain my closest friend. I will miss him dearly, and my deepest sympathies to Susan, Jonathan, and Jennifer. If I could quote an Irish proverb, death leaves a heartache no one can heal. Love leaves a memory no one can steal. Jonathan. I think Jonathan misses him the most. I didn't want to give a long speech. I figured everybody else would be. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for sharing. Dan loved both his Jewish and his Irish traditions. As Jen has told you, he was very proud of being a leprechaun. And so at this time, I'd like to read an Irish prayer in Dan's honor. Those we love don't go away. They walk beside us every day. Usually unheard, but always near. Still loved, still missed, and very dear. Paul Sherlock, Dan's best friend for over 50 years. We'd like you to come forward and share some thoughts with us.
I don't know that there's very much left to say, to be honest with you. I wish I was as eloquent as the other speakers, but I'm Irish. Dan was a good man. He will be missed by many. We were friends for over 50 years. That's a long time. He was good-natured. He was real easy to befriend. And most people were attracted to his Irish humor. He was an excellent tradesman and would share most of his knowledge with almost anyone. We worked together a lot over the years. We did not always agree, but I blame that mostly on him. He was a hard-headed Irishman. He loved boating. He loved his work. Most of all, he loved his family. His wife Susan was his life. When Jan and Jonathan were born, they became the center of his attention for many, many years. His grandchildren were just icing on the cake. He was so proud of them, and he is keeping a loving eye on them right now. I will miss him. He was a true friend. Rest easy, Dan, because we love you. Thank you.
Thank you all for your beautiful tributes. I feel like we've had a chance to feel the essence of Dan, to really know who he was and how he lived, and we are so grateful for his life. At the end of each line, please respond with the words, "We remember them." At the rising of the sun and at its going down, we remember them. At the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. At the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. At the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. When we have decisions that are difficult to make, we remember them. As long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us. We remember them. We now are ready to recite the traditional El Malei Rachamim prayer. If you have these books, it's on page 20 and 21. I will recite the Hebrew, and then I ask you to join me in the English on page 21. El Malei Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Hamsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'toharim Kezohar Harakia Mazirim Et Nishmat Daniel ben Avraham v'Sarah Shehalach le'olamo B'gan Eden Tehei Menuchato Ana Bal Harachamim Hastirehu B'Seter Kinafecha le'olamim Utzror B'tzror Chaim Et Nishmato Adonai Hu Nachalato V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar Amen. The English. O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Daniel McAlary, who has gone to his eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that he performed in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. The Lord is his portion. May he rest in peace. Let us say, Amen. Please rise as you are able as we recite the Mourner's Kaddish on page 14 and 15. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah be'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olamei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudasha b'richu le'ela minkol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'momav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Please be seated. As in the world around us, so too is human life. Darkness is followed by light, and sorrow by consolation. Life and death are twins. Grief and hope walk hand in hand. At this hour, may the presence of family and friends bring comfort and strength. May all who mourn take heart as they remember the goodness they have given and received. May Dan's memory always be a blessing, and let us say, Amen. We conclude our memorial service for Dan with the playing of Danny Boy on the bagpipes. When it is finished, we ask you to remain in your seats for the end of the service. I think that Dan would have loved today. Thank you all for coming.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we ask you to please remain seated. We'll dismiss you cue by cue, please. You can wait for everybody.